Hello, and welcome to our session called Integrating Third-Party and Custom Software into SUSE Manager's Content Lifecycle Management. In this session, Ryan Watts and myself will discuss what SUSE Manager is and how it helped Vishay integrate their third-party software into their SUSE Manager patch lifecycle. And also, we'll discuss how SUSE Manager and some functions in there helped Vishay gain control of their and visibility of their environment. But first, let's do some introductions. My name is Anthony Tortola, and I am the senior sales engineer with SUSE. Joining me virtually is Ryan Watts. He is a senior architecture engineer for Vishay Intertechnologies. Here's today's session agenda. I'll be discussing what challenges a typical landscape faces every day, and then provide an overview of what SUSE Manager is and how it can help. After that, Ryan will describe on how he applied SUSE Manager's toolset at Vishay, and he will give you real-world examples from his environment. So let's start. Here's a brief overview of what SUSE Manager is and what it can do. And this section might be a review for some of us, while it's an introduction to others. So let's dive in. As some of you are part of your organization's IT operations, you might be juggling several different aspects of your environment. And some of them, as you see here, are for example, where is your data center located? Are there more than one locations? Is it on-prem? Is it in the cloud? Or is it both? Are some of the systems running outdated and vulnerable software? If they are, how do I tell which system softwares are vulnerable to certain CVEs? And worst of all, how many tool sets must I use to be familiar with the different landscapes? And not to say the least, can I get a high-level view of the current state of my environment? There are probably many more challenges than what I have listed here, as each environment really is different. So let's take a look at some of these challenges as I laid them out. So you have day zero and day two operations, and we're looking at the challenges of IT complexity. Day zero operations are pretty straightforward. It's really all about consistency. Having a tool set that helps you build your environment in a repeatable, automated fashion will help you tackle the day two challenges. And speaking of, when it comes to day two operations, patching is always a challenge. For example, how do you patch and update your systems? Often companies we found having a regular patch cadence. Typically, it's I patch when I can or only when I need to, or in some cases, I don't patch at all. In some cases, these patches are done manually and not with a consistent patch set. This will result in systems being patched at different levels. Now, if you have a few systems, this can be manageable, but how would you patch hundreds, if not thousands, of systems without having different patch levels across your systems? You also got challenges addressing and meeting security and compliance standards. How do you report or query upon systems that are or may be vulnerable? Manual changes to a service configuration, whether planned or not, can result in configuration no longer being meeting your corporate standards. Typically, as we see, as environments grow and become more and more complex, server configuration and patch lifecycle is often an afterthought. Well, it's an afterthought until something really bad happens. This is where SUSE can help you. SUSE Manager, or SUMA as you may hear me call it, is SUSE software that can handle both day zero and day two operations. Before we go into that, let me just describe what SUSE Manager as a tool set is. SUSE Manager is a true open source management tool that's designed to simplify management and secure your systems wherever the devices may be located. SUSE Manager can manage a mixed Linux environment easily, as we support not just our own distribution. You can rest assured that knowing that your systems are healthy, secure, and current through SUSE Manager's scheduling and automation capabilities. Through a single pane of glass, you can schedule updates, configuration management, and audits across your mixed Linux environment. There's no need to use different management tools to maintain different Linux distributions. But since I stated that SUSE Manager is completely open source, you may ask, what project does SUSE Manager come from? The name of that project is called UUni. So UUni is our upstream community version of SUSE Manager. It's supported by the community and runs on our community version of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server called OpenSUSE Elite. UUni is updated on a monthly release cycle, and that cycle is considered that release is considered a rolling release. If you want to be part of the development of SUSE Manager, please join us at uuni-project.org and sign up and download the software. And then you can be part of the development cycle for SUSE Manager. Here you see a very classical client-server architecture, and this is a very simple setup where you have SUSE Manager at the center, and then it's talking back to either the customer center and or a third-party vendor's software repository. This alleviates having to open up multiple holes or paths through your firewall to get to the internet to get patches. As you move down, you have the option of directly connecting your clients to the SUSE Manager server, or you can utilize what we have is called proxy servers. And those proxy servers really start to break up your environment into logical units. Now, those logical units could be either different data centers in different locations, or one in the cloud, one on premise, or even as simple as lines of business want to be split up into different proxies just to keep the network traffic low for moving those patches around. It's important to note that we recently have made a change to how we subscribe SUSE Manager. In the past, you would have to purchase SUSE Manager and then what's called a Lifecycle client, a Lifecycle management client for the clients. Now all we do is subscribe the clients, and SUSE Manager SUSE Manager comes free, and the proxies come free. So now you can design your infrastructure using as many SUSE Manager servers and proxies as needed. And this helps when you get to an environment that looks somewhat like this. This is a much more complex environment. With designs like this or something similar, you can scale to as many clients as you need in different environments like on-prem or in the cloud, and that scale is almost unlimited. This creates a nicely separated, isolated landscapes, and you can do this based, again, on where the data centers reside or where the lines of business want to be drawn. Each SUSE Manager server is, although it's independent, it talks back to the hub server to get all its information about patches and entitlements. And as I mentioned before, since now with our change in subscriptions, to be compliant, all you need to do is be able to track how many clients you have in your environment. It makes it quite simple. I said before, we do more than just us. So sometimes an application is only certified against a specific Linux distribution. For SUSE Manager, this is not a problem. SUSE Manager can manage almost every enterprise Linux out there, as you can see. We manage SLES, RHEL, CentOS, Oracle Linux, Ubuntu, and Debian, and many more. We also do some community ones, such as OpenSUSE, obviously, Alibaba Cloud Linux, and others. So again, you could look at our documentation. You'll see what our support stack is right now. So since we say SUSE Manager is our best open source solution to manage Linux configuration and compliance across multiple Linux distribution, we also do this across not only the cloud and on-prem, but we do it across different types of hardware. Those hardware levels are included x86, IBM Power, and IBM Z systems, as well as Raspberry Pi. And again, this now makes it so no matter where your Linux may reside, SUSE Manager can go ahead and manage it. Now we've seen where and the who of where SUSE Manager can help with these challenges. We need to start talking more about how we do that. So let's just start off by kicking off something that we always talk about is security and compliance. As in most companies, there are compliance officers keeping a watchful eye on your infrastructure. Usually they will develop rules on how a server or a service gets deployed in their data centers. Some of these rules will be developed from well-known guidelines from institutional standard-based groups like for example, CIS, NIST, or DISA. SUSE Manager provides you the ability to use a tool called OpenSCAP. This tool can scan a device and compare it to those guidelines. And then SUSE Manager will display its level of compliance to those guidelines. Any deviation that is not acceptable to your environment can be remedied with either using SALT or Ansible configuration management. But sometimes auditors will ask if any systems are vulnerable to a specific CVE. We have a function called CVE audit, and with that function, a system administrator can then audit all devices based on the number of the CVE and look to see who is vulnerable and who's not. At this point, either an admin could take action and remedy the vulnerability, or pass on a report to the team showing which device is vulnerable, and let those team members go ahead and schedule the patch remediation. With both OpenSCAP and CVE audit, SUSE Manager can ensure the compliance level within your infrastructure. And that's great and all, but let's move on to what we always consider the heart of lifecycle management, is patching and upgrading. Is what we do all the time. So SUSE Manager leverages the Linux's distribution's native package update stack to deliver and update packages installed on a system. In this way, the distribution can check to see if there are any package dependencies the updated package may have and report that back to SUSE Manager. Here, this is where SUSE Manager now will say, hey, those package dependencies can be resolved with existing packages inside the repository, or if it cannot, it will fail the job outright. This is good because this keeps the device in a constant known good state. There'll be no broken modules here. For administrators using SUSE Linux Enterprise or SLES, we've added some unique functionality. So SLES distributions have the notion of being divided by service packs. Unlike other distributions, this is much more than just a point release. So it should be treated as like a separate distribution. For example, if you are currently running SLES 12 Service Pack 4 and you want to upgrade to Service Pack 5, there is a feature called service migration, and this function will allow you to go ahead and upgrade the server to the later code, and you could do this in a programmatic fashion. So it'll allow, if you have multiple servers you want to get done, it will do that, and then when it's complete, the server will be upgraded and have the proper repositories pointed to it. Another example in your environment, maybe you want to do a major upgrade version of SLES, say from SLES 12 to SLES 15. Then again, SUSE Manager can help with that in-place upgrade and something we call an offline migration. So what's nice about performing this offline migrations, there's no need to have Pixie booting required, so you don't have to boot and have a Pixie server waiting for you. But you can also perform this offline migration on-premise, in your data centers, and in the cloud. So now that we see that we have patching and upgrades pretty much resolved or covered, let's talk about the other bread and butter function, and that's configuration management and automation. SUSE Manager uses SALT for connectivity to clients, and its configuration management and OS image creation. We do provide the needed SALT binaries for all distributions that we support, but SALT is not the only option you have for configuration management within SUSE Manager, but I'll get to that a little bit later. With SALT, you could have your security settings that have been approved by your security team applied and enforced. Any unauthorized change would be remedied immediately upon next check-in. So, and also with SALT, you can detect changes to your environment, such as a new device got added to your network. And we have a function called reactors. This gives you the event-driven automation that you need. Like, for example, when a new system comes online, you want to immediately apply those security policies to that new device. So with that, let me go ahead and start talking about the other options that I mentioned before about configuration management. And that obviously, as I talked about before, was Ansible. So as of version 4.2, we've included Ansible for configuration management as a tech preview. So now, if you have Ansible playbooks in your environments, you can go ahead and reuse them. Again, this kind of shows our willingness at SUSE to work with what the customer has defined in their environment. We will work with other vendors to provide that true operability, interoperability, and not try to force you into what we sell. Now you have a choice. You could continue to use Ansible playbooks while you migrate to Salt, or you could continue to use them indefinitely. And if you want more information, you can go to my other session. It's integrate your Ansible systems into SUSE Manager, and it's tutorial TUT 1128. With that, let's move forward to those are running those who are running SAP workloads and running it on Celeste for SAP. SUSE Manager provides you a robust tool set for deploying and managing this specific environment. You could create patch sets based on your SAP landscapes. You could also add our live patching to save downtime, and we provide you formulas to set up and maintain these SAP environments. These formulas are based on SAP provided SAP notes, and we actually also include some that are focused on our high availability stack. Um, on top of that, with our optional monitoring subscription, we will also include SAP Focus Grafana dashboards. Um, those dashboards will give you some insight and monitoring to how your health of your SAP environment. Um, for those customers that get Celeste for SAP from a public cloud pay as you go, the subscription for lifecycle management is included at no cost. So here we go. We'll start talking about content lifecycle management. This is really where you start to see a differentiation between, say, SUSE Manager and other tool sets. This is designed to mirror your environment. You can create what's called a patch landscape. You will start by creating a content lifecycle management project. You will then define the patch repositories that you want to include in the project. Um, and that could be SUSE patches, third-party patches, your own patches for your own software, and that would be included in the project. You could even add filters to allow or deny packages as you need. For example, say you only want a repository to be delivered that is containing of just security patches. You would simply create a filter allowing patches that have been defined as a security patch into the channel. So when you go ahead and start mirroring, it will only allow those patches through. Um, then you go in and create the landscape by mirroring what you have in your environment. In most of, if not all, IT infrastructures, there's at least two different levels of servers. You have test dev and then production. In this example, you see we have three. We have dev, we have QA, and then production. With this three levels, you could create a landscape of patch sets. You will clone the first patch set into dev and have assigned service to them. After the testing of the patches is complete, you will go ahead and promote that patch set into QA, which has its own servers. And after those servers will do the testing and complete the testing and confirm that everything is good, you will then promote that same exact patch set into production. Production, again, has obviously its own servers attached to it. And then you'll be able to now have two levels of testing before your patch set hits production. Um, by doing this, you're ensuring and you're having complete control of what that patch set looks like, and you can mirror this across your entire environment, whether it's on premise or in the cloud. This gives you that consistent software version you'll need for a stable environment. Okay, that was a lot of information, but now this is the fun part of the session, as I say. You'll get to see all of this as in examples in a real world environment. And with that, I'm handing over the virtual mic to Ryan Watt.
Thank you, Anthony. My name is Ryan Watts, and I wanted to continue talking to you about SUSE Manager and how you can import external repositories or build custom RPMs and integrate them into your own project lifecycle. I couldn't find a lot of great documentation out there, so I thought this might be useful for those of you that are just getting into SUSE Manager or those of you that have been using it and are looking to incorporate external repositories or custom RPMs into their own project lifecycle. A little bit about me. I've been a Linux professional for over 20 years, currently working for Vishay, the DNA of tech. We manufacture electrical components that are used in everyday electronic applications all over the world. Getting started into adding external repositories. I always recommend that you build or create a separate parent channel for that repository. This allows you to add it as a separate source in your content lifecycles. Uh, when creating the repository, then you can schedule it to sync on a daily or on a weekly or whatever basis you'd like. I'll show a little bit of that to you later. And then you'll need to push out the GPG keys to your minions so that there will be no complaints from Zipper when it comes time to install them. And you would do that using the RPM import, and that can be done with Salt as well as through one of the configuration channels in SUSE Manager. Once you have that repository built, you can then add it to a project into your content lifecycle, and I'll be showing you that as well. This is a repository that we're bringing in for Microsoft SQL Server. In this case, we only wanted to bring in the database adapter since we're going to be talking to just a database on SQL Server. We don't need to bring in all the other repositories. So if you'll look, I have at the bottom a filter for plus just the Microsoft ODBC and the Unix ODBC RPMs from Microsoft. Once that is created, you can then, in your parent channel that you've built, you can select the repository, and then you can schedule it to sync on a daily basis. If you're scheduling it on a daily basis to sync, and as long as you don't get any errors, you know that when you build your new lifecycle, you're getting the most recent packages coming from that repository into your content lifecycle. Here you can see in the content lifecycle how you can select that parent channel to be used when building your own custom project. Another thing you may encounter is wanting to include a custom RPM or an external provided RPM into your content lifecycle build. To do that, it's much like an external repository, only we're going to be hosting it right on SUSE Manager. Typically, you can put it right in SRV, www, htdocs, just create a folder in there, name it whatever you like, and then you can import that almost as if it's an external provided source. The one catch is typically if you create your own RPM, you're going to have to sign it with a GPG key. I like to sign it with SUSE Manager's GPG key since most of the minions already have that key imported. To do that, I put a few commands in this slide that you can use to configure your environment and then sign RPMs with the SUSE Manager key. Once you have the RPM signed, you can use the create repo command to create the repos to make it available for SUSE Manager. Import it as you would an external repository, only pointing to SUSE Manager's web server. And then you can just push it out as a source. You want to create another parent channel as we did with the external, and then that will become a source for your content lifecycle. After you have everything installed as you want it, you may want to do some configuration changes, and I found that Salt is a great way to do that. You can either use, in this slide I show the configuration manager in which we can push out different configurations for the RPMs that are installed, or you could use Salt to do it from the file system. The next thing you can do is add functionality to your Salt scripts by using a variety of different formats within the Salt script itself. This can be done also, again, in the configuration channel or via the command line in the SRV Salt directory on SUSE Manager. Things you can kind of do with this is, base variables on grains that are pre-existing or pillar data of the minions, which could be unique for each of the configurations you want to push out for these data. If you need more custom data, you could create a formula in SUSE Manager, which you can input custom data right through the SUSE Manager GUI. To do this, you basically create directories in the listed directories, the SRV formula metadata, formula name. This could be anything. I'll show you an example of one we use for SAP. but simply you just create a form.yml, YAML, a metadata.xml file, and a pillar example in there. And then the salt scripts and templates themselves actually are stored in SRV salt, and then a matching formula name in there. An example of this is for our SAP clients. We have a formula set up that we can put a unique ID for the SAP database, as well as specific kernel tuning to that server. And then when we build that instance and run the high state, it will incorporate these custom pillar data entries. To further refine the formulas, you can get into adding things like maps and configurations that are specific to certain architectures that may not necessarily be in by default. This is good if you have a platform or multiple platforms within your SUSE Manager, whether it be different OSs, but you still want to use the same pillar metadata and formulas. You can define those types of things in there. And I do simple things like create uninstalls that you can then select the uninstall functionality, run a high state, and then it'll remove, whether it be the configuration that you put in or all of the RPM packages themselves. So thank you for joining me for the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Anthony, and we'll try to get any questions, answers, or feedback to you. And I appreciate you viewing. Thank you. Have a good day.